All right, guys, welcome back to the Sophisticated Man. Obviously, you know who I am. Welcome back to another podcast episode where I have another special guest, Mr. Zachary Gallardo here. What's up, man?
What's good?
So, Zachary is a relationship coach, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if that's how you would word it. So, just quickly for the people that don't know you, just kind of describe who you are, what you do, and why you do what you do.
Yeah. Well, first thing, only my mother calls me Zachary, so we'll go with Zach.
Got
And
it. Got it.
yeah, relationship coach is the title. Relationship expert, life coach.
Got it.
But generally, I help single people, especially those who have done the inner work on spiritual journeys, find and call in partnership. Because in this day and age of dating, it's really easy to get lost in the apps and swiping and to just not feel successful or find a partner who can keep up with the work that you've done. So I help them call in a partner. And for couples, I'm usually the last line of defense after you've done some therapy. I'm really good at navigating complex and difficult communication conversations and helping them reunion and get themselves back on the same page.
Got it. Got it. Yeah. Love that. And that's one of the reasons I got you on here is because obviously with your work, I've seen in your content, you talk a lot about like the energy, the dynamics between masculine and feminine, which is a lot of stuff that I talk about on my content as well. And I think that kind of raises the central question here, and most likely the theme, I think, of this podcast, which is really how do men attract quality relationships into their lives? And I think that that's something that isn't really talked about a lot in the space that we're in. I think a lot of it's through hooking up and all that kind of culture, which I think we'll get into probably later on. But just to maybe start off with that, like in your opinion, how do you think a man can go about attracting like a quality relationship?
Yeah. So there's like a few layers to this question, but on
Mhm.
on one layer, it's a man should be, and I'm sure this is most of your audience and a lot of mine,
Mhm.
which is those really oriented towards personal development.
Right.
And when you're a man, like on your path, on your game, focusing on increasing the size of your body, your strength, the size of your mindset, the size of your bank account, these are really the important things to do. And like I'm in my early 30s. I think if I remember, you're approaching that. Yeah, you're
Almost,
in your
yeah,
mid
getting there.
mid mid to late 20s. Like
Mhm.
this is about that time where we've got to be focusing on our purpose and our mission. And truthfully, when you're doing that, there's really not much it takes to attract a woman. Like if you take care of yourself at all, really, like step one is take care of yourself. Step two is have your selection.
Mhm.
And truthfully, like, this is why you look around, it's really, really funny guys can get girls, guys with a lot of money can get girls or guys with a lot of game. And so if you focus on your charisma, your bank account, and your vocabulary, well, all of a sudden you're like a super saiyan man.
Mhm.
And so it's really more about like the woman that you need in that season of your life or what you're looking for. There comes a point, when you get older as a man, you begin to have the selection power rather than women, which is what we usually experience when we're younger.
Mm. Yeah, you talk a lot about some really good things there. I wanted to maybe key in on that last point that you just made about once you kind of do the work, you're almost given the power to like choose from whoever you want. Not obviously whoever you want, but you have a much broader selection than if you were to just actively start looking for somebody first before doing the work on yourself. And in my opinion, I think that's more where guys get into the like guys say, oh, you're chasing somebody. That's when I think you're chasing because you're trying to look for that, validation or that fulfillment in another person. But when you're doing it from the frame of, okay, I'm working on myself, I'm content, I'm happy on my own. Now I just want somebody that I think is a little different. It's more nuanced. It's like you're almost pursuing from a place of wholeness instead of emptiness. What did you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And from personal experience, I like had to go through a lot of bad relationships where I messed up in the dynamic and I just wasn't solid as a man
Yeah.
before I finally realized what was going on. And yeah, ideally in the masculine and feminine frame, which is most people, the woman is going to be more of the one that comes into your frame. So you're going to
Mm-hmm.
pull her into your world, your reality, your language, your style, your vision and purpose. And it's essentially whoever, is able to like have that that fire burning for purpose inside of them the most takes the masculine pole. So yeah, what ends up happening is, you need to be able to hold yourself so that way in your frame you can call in a woman and have interesting things for her to do in there. So,
Mm-hmm.
I'm building this whole coaching business. I'm collaborating with a couple other coaches. I have a lot of skills and things that I enjoy, like freestyle rapping and dance. I'm a part of some community out here in Dallas. So when I pull a woman into my world, she's gonna, you know, be interested. She's gonna be intrigued at the least. I'm an interesting man. I
Mm-hmm.
don't have the fast car. I don't have millions yet, but I'm interesting. And so your frame needs to be interesting and solid enough to hold a woman.
Mm-hmm. I love the way you put that. And I think that's an important key for guys to understand. It's like it's not so much the money or like the cars, the clothes, like the look. It's more or less the experience that you can give someone and showing this woman, hey, I have things going on. I'm interesting. I have, different uh things that I do, different things that I kind of explore, and you're just inviting her along to do those with you essentially. So I love that, and I agree 100%. I think the more diverse you can be as a man, the more you know, more you can explore your own interests and explore what things you like to do, things you're passionate about. I think it's only going to make it more attractive for a woman to be like, "Whoa, this guy is different. He's not like every other guy that I meet. He has things that is unique to himself." So I would agree 1,000%. I also want to kind of ask too, before you mentioned, guys having that purpose, that like fire to do something, a mission in life. And if you guys are watching my content, even for one video, you'll see that I say that maybe 100 times in the video. So I am 100% on board. I want to ask though, how problematic do you think it is when guys put women almost as their purpose, or like that's their highest priority? Because I think some guys do that where they focus way too much on, man, I need a girlfriend, I need to get laid, I need to start talking to girls, whatever it is, and that becomes their main focus in life.
Yeah, I mean that's it's kind of, I feel like classically known at this point that that's just not a great idea,
Yeah.
and it always backfires. And it's what's weird about it is like on a deeper level, what's happening is that that the traditional hierarchy of like woman submits to man, man submits to God. I understand that that's not the most nuanced way to say it, but
Mhm.
the reason why that works is because yeah, like the feminine checks, the man and follows and surrenders. The man checks God. And like we have to have that in order for her to feel safe with us, we have to be aligned with God. Because as soon as she becomes the top of the hierarchy, what is it? Man, God, woman? It's a little bit confusing for her and she doesn't really know where to go. She wants to trust that you're guiding the relationship, even if like she's independent and has her own life and she doesn't necessarily need to be guided. She'll follow your orders when you're guiding the relationship itself.
Yes.
So this is where I want us to go because I am attuned, spiritually embodied. I'm listening to God, purpose, source, whatever word you want to use, and this is the direction I need to go. So we're going to move this way. Okay.
Hmm. Yeah, man. I mean, the more that I kind of go about my life, I realize that leadership takes on so many different categories and so many different meanings. Like you're not only leading yourself and your life and where you're going in your direction, you're also kind of leading where that relationship ultimately goes. Like, are you thinking about marriage? Are you thinking about starting a family? Are you thinking about moving in together? I think like as men, that's kind of on us to choose how devoted, how committed we truly are to this person. And I find it interesting that 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 when you're aligned with that purpose, you're aligned with that direction in yourself. it kind of makes it easier to choose what it is that you want to do. Because I feel like if you don't have that, then you're almost letting her take the lead. You're almost letting her choose. Hey, like, I don't know, like, just like, we're just having fun. I don't really know where we're going. And that kind of makes her feel unsafe.
Right. And there's a difference between the natural blooming that happens in the beginning of a relationship versus like, let's just go with the flow and see what happens.
Yeah.
Because one is like a courtship game, that blooming phase, that dance, that energetic, tension that starts to arise. And the other is, well, I don't really know what I want. I don't really know what I desire to commit to.
Hmm. Yeah, there's definitely a big difference between that of having that naturally kind of play out in the beginning, but then not having a plan at all. Like once you kind of know and vet this woman and say, "Oh, well, she makes sense. I like this. I like that." There's qualities that make sense. You then have to choose, well, what do I want to do with it? It's kind of it is up to you to ultimately make that decision. And I think that comes back to knowing like who you are and knowing what it is you want out of life. And I've said this before too. I don't really know what your position is on this, but I've told guys and made videos about this. It said if you don't know what you're doing in life as a man, like if you don't, I'm not saying you have to have everything figured out, but if you don't know where you're heading, you're just not quite ready for a relationship just yet. You have to figure yourself out first. Some guys get premature and they just start, and there's nothing wrong with talking to women at all, but they just make approaches and they're on dating apps and they do all this stuff and they don't have anything, they don't have anything going on for themselves. They just focus on getting women. And something I always say is, well, you can maybe attract a woman initially, maybe for a month or for a couple weeks. But if you're thinking long-term relationship, there needs to be that base for her to feel secure in the long term.
Yeah, I agree. And I want to give men credit here because, we need connection.
Yeah, yeah.
We need emotional connection, and most of us, if not all of us, are deeply wounded. And that's like where we're approaching relationships from, is not from the most healthy space. Like, who here had a parents whose marriage was healthy
Right.
and
Not
learned a
many.
lot about how to relate from
Yeah,
their parents? Fucking no one.
that's true.
Um, and so like we have to, I think, go through different iterations and seasons of relationships in order to like heal and clear. I would call it karma,
Hmm.
but like clear the wounding, clear the patterning, clear the energy that's inside of you that isn't even yours. Relationships are one of the fastest catalysts towards spiritual evolution.
Hmm.
And so, in a way, even if you're not the most solid man, you could find yourself in a relationship container and grow in 5 years, 5 years worth of time in 5 months.
Hmm.
So, there's an interesting
Yeah,
dialogue there, about how to use a relationship container for growth as well.
for sure. Well, I'm of the belief that every relationship is an opportunity to grow and it's an opportunity to kind of look at yourself because one thing that I had to learn was when I was single and when I was in a relationship, it's like, damn, there's so much stuff I was just unaware of. And like literally when you're with somebody and you spend that amount of time together, you have so much stuff reflecting back about you that you maybe didn't even realize and how this person reacts to that, this woman, how she reacts to you is kind of showing your your strengths or your weaknesses and like what you're maybe not that good at. So I find that also really interesting of how it's almost a mirror to kind of showing, this is you. This is how you're coming off.
And yes, the caveat I would add is that it's how the feminine is reflecting you.
Right.
So
Right.
specifically, so it may not
Yeah.
be like this is you,
Hmm.
but this is how the feminine responds to you.
Very true.
And obviously, you need to be careful because some feminine, women are in their own wounded stage. And so
Hmm.
you may not be getting the most accurate reflections of your masculine by them. But
Mm.
generally, if a pattern emerges, or if you trust this woman even a little bit, like your gut's like, ah, fuck, she's probably right. then
Mm,
yeah, you're getting a reflection of how the feminine is responding to you.
mm. And I want to touch on that because I think what you're speaking of is like conscious relationships, like two people that are spiritually more mature. They've worked on themselves. And this goes for women too, kind of working on what they have to work on, being in tune with themselves. That I think like for me, that's the best kind of courtship is two people that genuinely have that self-growth mindset. They work on themselves internally, externally, and then they find each other out of pure desire, pure want, not a need. So I think that is it. I mean, at least in my opinion, the best kind of relationship. Um, how important do you think it is to find women who are not I want to make this distinction, not the same as you, like they're not obviously doing the same exact things, but they have the same mentality around growth and spirituality.
So this, I think, all depends on the season that you're in, um,
Mm,
because I'm gonna bookmark this question. I actually want to give a brief like story of background for me here because I think this will matter.
sure.
Um, I about 4 years ago, was in a pretty toxic, crazy relationship with an older woman who was about 40, and I was like 29, 28, and yeah, that relationship ended. And as I processed it, I realized, yeah, she was holding more the masculine pole. I was holding more the feminine pole. In some ways, she was helping me clear mommy things, older woman, nurturing, cared for. I wanted to be protected. Da 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 da.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I went through after that, I committed to celibacy, which is the first time I'd ever done this. I was like, okay, no sex, no ejaculating, no porn. Um, I still did have like a self pleasure practice. And around the end of this, 9 months I went through this. I started to get the like sense of myself again. I've been focusing like an entire birth cycle on myself, practices, business, health, mental health, like physical strength, and then yeah, there just came a point, and I was like, I think that I'm ready to reconnect with the feminine again. And so around this time I started learning about tantra as well, sacred sexuality, exploring sex with no goal, just the immersion and the deep experience of connection within it. And I realized that that's what I wanted. That was the season I was in. I was like, I am not looking for marriage. I am not looking for a long-term partner. The most aligned person I could call into my life right now is someone who wants to explore the innocence and play and no goal of sex with me. And yeah, so I remember I made like a couple offers actually. Like there were, I think, one or two girls that I proposed this to. I was like, hey, I'm looking to form this kind of dynamic with a woman. Are you interested? And they said, one was like, let me think about it. The other was like, I'm like, cool. And then, yeah, I think it was like the third girl that I, there was like this natural spark of attraction. We didn't even necessarily like talk about it, but there was so much being evoked um, that, yeah, that's exactly what she was craving. I need to re-explore my connection to sex. And yeah, so we ended up going on this like spiritual teachers retreat together. We had an amazing weekend. Um, and yeah, she's now been my partner for 2 years. So I wasn't even looking for like a long-term partner. I just knew what I wanted in the season that I was in.
Mm.
And I knew where I wanted to be met by the feminine and like exactly what I was looking for. And she hates when I tell this story because she's like, "What do you mean you didn't want to marry me when you met me?" But I'm like, that's just that's not where I was at. I want to aim at marriage with you now, but
Hmm.
it's just not. It wasn't the season I was in. So you have to know what season you're in and what kind of woman you want, because there
Hmm.
may be a dynamic. The dynamics we have with younger women, 18 to 25-year-old women. It's very easy to feel pedestalized and ego boosted as a man. So maybe you need a fucking ego boost. Go date an 18-year-old. Or maybe you need to get your mind and ego cracked and shattered open by a conscious woman. Go date a woman in her late 30s. She'll fuck you up
Mm.
in the best way.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just depends what you need.
Mm. That's really interesting. I love how you're breaking it down into seasons and kind of like meeting people where you're at currently. Because I think that what we're talking about is something that I don't know if a lot of guys really pick up on or even are aware of, kind of attracting who reciprocates where you currently are and in that stage of your life. I think some guys kind of just like they see a hot girl and they're like, okay, this is the one, or like, let me just start talking to her. But they miss that, you know, they miss looking for that beyond like her looks, beyond her beauty. What else are you trying to learn, or where are you really in your life and in your stage of development? Are you just starting? Are you like been on your journey for a couple of years? Like, I find that very interesting that that's kind of how it just naturally kind of happens. You don't have to force really anything. It just kind of shows up in your life, at some point. And I wanted to touch on what you said earlier about that living in celibacy and kind of having that maybe peered away from women for a short time because I have experienced that in my life. I think back in 2015, 2016, I did celibacy for maybe like it was like 4+ years. I was like on it for a while and I wasn't like super strict with it. I was, with masturbating and stuff like that. I would still occasionally do it, but I just wasn't having sex, wasn't really seeing anybody, kind of just was focusing on myself and what I wanted to do. Um, I think that's important. I don't think that it's necessarily as extreme as some guys make it because there's, obviously with NoFap and that whole community, there's like a lot of things to be said about it. I think you did it from a very healthy place and a very like growth oriented reason. Um, and maybe we could touch on that is how healthy can that be to maybe abstain sometimes just temporarily from feminine or from femininity just to kind of get yourself together.
So I think that the best like actual hack or tip here is you could change nothing about your relationship to sex and porn, but change your relationship to ejaculating specifically.
Mm,
If you like really want to gain mastery and control over your energy, your emotions, your mind, your physical body,
yeah.
continue having sex and continue masturbating, but stop ejaculating.
Mm,
You are going to lose your mind at how ridiculous it sounds, how tough it is. But if you can do it, like when you have sex and then just decide that you're done, not have your, not have that decide when you're done, but just say,
yeah.
there's a moment she's like on the fucking, she's like heavy breathing. You just like slip out and you're just like, yeah, I think I'm good. It's insane. It like does something to your neurochemistry. It does something to your spiritual energy, your whole field, because you're containing your seed. And then like you get to use that seed towards creation in other aspects of your life. So take that energy that you would have released onto her face and go put it into your business or into the gym and just like watch what happens.
I think that's awesome because we're bringing up sexual transmutation, and I've talked about that before too, just through like Napoleon Hill's book, I believe, was Think and Grow Rich. He talks about that a lot, and I agree. I think that is definitely a hugely underrated kind of thing that guys don't generally do. Is instead of expelling all that energy and that um like sensation that you get, that urge, use it towards productive means. I'm 100% on board with that. Um, because I think it does reflect a lot of the principles that I talk about as well of, being disciplined and doing uncomfortable things and trying things that are hard and not always taking the easy way out. Because, metaphorically too, if you think about it, like just releasing, it's like, oh, I'm just like relaxing. I'm kind of taking the foot off the gas a little bit. And I think what you're saying is to not do that, to just kind of use that energy towards more productive things like business, fitness, whatever, spiritual growth, anything.
At least try it. I'm not saying
Yeah,
you have to do this forever.
sure.
And one of the, and this is, I I even slightly caution to say things like that because there's a whole I could write a book on like game and like this style. It's like conscious game, if you will, and
Yeah.
especially when it comes to like having power and power dynamics in relationships. This
Hmm.
is one of the ways where, as a man, you can really like feel the sense of power and leverage.
Mm.
Because like, what is a woman? She wants you to come. She does.
Sure.
She absolutely does.
Yep.
The dark side of that is like the succubus because she wants your seed, she wants your energy. Give it to
Yeah.
me, give it to me.
Yep.
But if you just say no,
Yeah.
it does something weird to the dynamic. It does. Like the next woman that you sleep with, try holding your seed, but be complete from a space of actual completion. Don't just do it for the power, but
Hmm.
do it because it does feel complete. Like definitely let her get hers, like
Hmm.
play around. But this is why there's a book called Tantric Sex for Men, Making Love a Meditation. And this is
Hmm.
like for me the number one book to read when it comes to understanding this type of like how to do the and manipulate these energetics.
Mm. Very interesting. I'll have to put that on the book list for sure, because that's to me that sounds really interesting. Um, yeah, I mean that I think that that's like maybe we can kind of dive into this now since we're talking about sex and everything like that. I think some guys view sex in such a different light than the way that we're describing it right now. Obviously, with the culture and the climate that we live in, everybody's just kind of hooking up, not really doing any like conscious work on themselves or even in the relationship that they have. You know, they're kind of just picking a person randomly, having one night stands, and kind of just going about their way. Maybe they don't talk to that person again. It's very, very common, especially in the youth of society, like people my age or a little bit younger. And I know how damaging that can be. I'm sure some people maybe they don't even pay attention to that because it's such a common thing and they kind of ignore it. But how dangerous, I guess, could that be to a man's growth if he were to just, oh, just, just bang a bunch of women and not even really care about it?
Well, it sets a tone for the type of partner you are and how you view yourself. Um, so in like a way, karmically speaking, like yeah, that's happening to you as well. Whatever you're outputting,
Sure.
there's also going to be this like energy being given back to you in the same manner, which is what would you call it? Non-committal,
Mm-hmm.
low degree of responsibility,
Right.
low degree of communication or long-term visioning.
Mm-hmm.
So those are like the energies surrounding your behavior. And so, yeah, if
Yep.
you're struggling in other places in your life, that's how you do one thing is typically how you do everything. So,
Yeah, I was just thinking that. I was just thinking of that quote as you said it. So I 100% am on. Yeah, I agree. Like it's if you're non-committal with your relationships and with your sex life and just like kind of flighty and all over the place, most likely your procedures or then your systems in your life look that way too. Like your business, if you even have a business, your commitment to the gym, like doing anything long term, most likely is up in the air too.
yeah, in some ways. Or, I mean, like, listen, let's not pretend that like I don't have fantasies of allowing myself to just go all in on like using women for my pleasure and like discarding them when I'm done with them
Hmm.
and just letting them be my daily inspirational muse so I can fill my sexual cup and then go do what I want.
Hmm.
It's always there.
Yeah.
I don't know if it ever leaves. But to have like long-term power, you need to be willing to take like long-term responsibility. And I mean, Spider-Man had it right, or Uncle Ben had it right.
Legit.
Um, with great power.
Mm,
But it's true. It's true.
facts.
And so yeah, yeah, you gotta be cautious. Maybe not careful, but just be cautious and be
Yeah.
conscious.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree 100%. Being the Spider-Man fan that I am, I mean, I've heard that phrase maybe 100 times in my childhood, and even today, like just knowing that, I think that truly makes a man is the amount of responsibilities that he holds, and if it's to himself, it's to business, to his employees, to his family. I think that truly makes a man, a man. So one of the biggest virtues I think a man can have is being responsible. And it's interesting because I made a video not too long ago, maybe a few months back, about abundance. And I think abundance is amazing. Obviously, you want abundance. You want abundance in money, sex, success, whatever it is. Like that's a good thing. But I also kind of threw in there as like a little caveat as well of being just aware of how much abundance you are allowing into certain areas. Like it's great to have abundance in food, for example, but there is a fine line between the abundance and then indulging too much and being almost gluttonous and kind of like having that overpower you in a way. So I've always been, of the mindset that yes, with great power does come good responsibility, and with that responsibility, it's also like kind of actively choosing to, even though I have all these women at my disposal, doesn't mean I have to act on every single one. Like it's good to have options for sure, but I think a good virtuous man who's in control of himself doesn't let his impulses just take control.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, 100%. So how can guys maybe practice that? I think you were kind of talking about that a minute ago, like practicing impulse control, maybe part of the celibacy thing you were talking about.
So I'm, so I'm like a Scorpio, and I have a lot of that in my chart. So for me, there's a lot of intensity, death, and transformation, just like energetically around me. This is just a part of my, yeah, natural design as I experience my life. And so I work best in extremes, and that if something is no longer serving me, I cut it off.
Mm.
And so fasting, and like, first of all, if you don't do this, literal fasting is
Yeah.
one of the best ways to actually get into the energetic
Yep.
of impulse control. So
Mm.
I think the longest fast I've done was 100 hours, or it was like close to it, like 96 hours.
Mm.
And what was weird is when I reached that point, I could have just kept going, but I got scared, like nervous. I was like, wait, should I feel this good after 5 days of not eating?
Yeah.
But the first few days and the first few times you try it fucking suck. But that's like because you have to actually find a way to ground the practice in. So your standard no fat cold shower fasting,
Yep.
right, are just great ways to train the energetics of impulse control.
Mm-hmm. Totally. I agree 1,000%. That's something I try to do on myself daily. I had a recently did like a challenge where I was like starting to document some of these things, but I try to do cold shower like as soon as I wake up, first thing in the morning, try to get up earlier. No fap, obviously. And at fasting myself, I've done intermittent fasting, I think, for a large portion of my life, maybe like the past like 4 or 5 years I've been doing it. But I recently started doing more extended fasts where I wouldn't eat for I think it was 36. I'm not even close to where you got. I had maybe 3 days of fasting. So I was taking some baby steps, but even that was was
Tough.
was challenging. Yeah, especially on the weekends because I would start Friday, end it Sunday night, like Sunday evening ish, and it's really hard when everybody else around you is just stuffing their face and eating, and you're like, oh my God, I can't eat that juicy steak right now. I got to just hold off on that. But yeah, I think you're 100% right. I think when you're practicing that, it just helps you create that discipline, that almost stoicism in a way to kind of remain in your ground, in your frame, in your ground without having to just, kind of react to something.
Yeah, and it's a good way to call things into your life too, because when you're, I mean, there's so many things symbolically that hit. Like when you're not digesting, then
Yeah.
you're in like when you're not breaking down and in catalytic, what is the word, catabolic? Then
Mm-hmm.
then you're in, fuck, I might be getting the words wrong, but when you're not breaking down, you're building. And so your
Mm-hmm.
bodies are like cellular regeneration,
Right.
cellular autophagy. You're
Yep.
recycling the old. You're also emptying. And like as a man, like we want to be empty. Like that's why we release, and that's why that's why our biggest fantasies are just fucking off society, going into the woods, living our own solitude life, and
Yeah.
perhaps a dog, and no one to
Mm-hmm.
bother us. We just want to be empty. Whereas a woman's fantasy is to be filled, to be
Mm.
full. So she wants to have a house with everything filled in it, designed, decorated, quite physically filled, like multiple holes, right? But
Hmm.
like with men, we're just like, just leave us alone. We want to be empty. So there's another way the dynamic plays itself out. So
Mm.
yeah, when you're empty though, you have room to hold more.
Mm.
So
Yeah, like almost like a vessel in a way.
yeah,
Like I like the way that you broke that down, the analogy, because I remember I experienced that actually when I was fasting. I was kind of going through this weird phase of my business where I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do with my content because I had an old YouTube channel, which and if you guys are watching this, you probably know I had on a video before where I had an old channel and it was like I had maybe 22,000, 21,000 subscribers. And I kind of realized that the stuff I was putting on that channel, I didn't necessarily want to do anymore. So I had to make a decision. Do I either start a new channel with some new content, doing the stuff I want to do now, or do I just keep pounding out new videos, putting it on the old channel, and hoping that eventually pays off? And the whole time I didn't know what to do, was very confused, very, I guess, kind of even stressed out at some points because I didn't know what the next step was. So during that month of April, I'd fast for 36 hours during the weekend. And I did that every week. And I would just like take that time to meditate, take that time to go on more walks alone by myself, kind of just clear some stuff out. And it's crazy because people would think, oh, well, you're not eating, you wouldn't have that much energy, right? You'd be more tired. I was like amped. I remember feeling like really energetic, very mentally clear. And the answers just kind of came to me. I don't know. It sounds kind of crazy, but I was able to kind of figure out what I wanted to do with clarity and with intention when I was in that space. And then obviously here we are with a new channel making that decision. But I agree with what you're saying because I had firsthand experience being like cleared out and having just no clutter, in my mind.
yeah, it's also the best weight loss tool. Not a lot of people talk
Yeah,
about it because
for sure.
you can't make money off of telling people to do nothing.
No.
So there's no
No.
there's no pharmaceutical benefit. It's not a pill and it's not a diet plan. It's just literally don't eat. But then
Hmm.
like, yeah, would you rather have someone on your team? Would you rather have another man on your team who's full or who's hungry? Like, there's that. And feast and famine has been the cycle of humanity for, thousands, tens of thousands of years. So
Hmm.
you'd eat a shitload and you wouldn't eat for 2 days while you tried to find food. And yeah, your body produces HGH, more testosterone. Um, yeah, it's really good. You should do a 72-hour fast once a year, in my opinion.
Yeah. That's the next step for me, man. I definitely want to improve on those numbers. Probably starting in the next few months. That'd be a really nice goal for the end of the year. But yeah, I could go on the benefits of fasting till I'm blue in the face because
Yeah.
I definitely have experienced the benefits firsthand, and I recommend any guy do that too. If you're curious, to start out with intermittent fasting, if you have never done it before, just like kind of get started with it. But yeah, I think anything that you're doing to like abstain from excessive pleasure for a certain amount of time. This is something I talk about a lot on my channel about kind of like actively seeking discomfort, actively challenging yourself, even if it's small, like going and waking up earlier than you did the day before and just like starting to do your work first thing in the morning, just changing up your routines. I think the more that a man is grounded in his purpose, he's just much more, laser focused and he doesn't get distracted too much by pleasure. And I don't know exactly what the quote was. I forget who said this, but they said that if a man is doesn't have purpose, he distracts himself with pleasure. And I could definitely relate to that because I've done it before in the past too.
Yeah. So I think it's important to slip in here, a conversation about like trauma and coping and healing, because
Yeah.
I don't think gets nearly talked about enough, especially for men.
Hmm.
And this is why, like, yeah, a big portion of the work that I do is surrounding like inner healing and wounding and being able to understand like the nervous system and how it regulates itself. Because sometimes it's not just like pleasure because of no purpose. Sometimes it's pleasure because you're fucking coping and your
Yeah.
nervous system is like out of whack. And
Right.
so like you have to kind of know the difference between, because if you just tell people to take away their coping mechanisms, it's a recipe for disaster and for relapse.
Mm.
And so it's a 0% win game, that one. So
Hmm.
you have to, this is why like coaching and mentorship and stuff is so valuable, because it provides a space for you to release all of that and have it contained, rather
Hmm.
than trying to have, figure out what the hell is going on, or why do I keep self-sabotaging or going back into the same things.
Right.
So yeah, you have to take some care at first when you start making shifts like this. Which shifts can I just stop doing because I'm fucking off? And which shifts are deeply rooted in pain or trauma that are actually like coping mechanisms that are going to be much harder to remove the cords of.
Mm. That's a good point you bring up because I think there is levels to it. There's certain things where, if you're just eating a bunch of junk food because you're laying around watching movies because you feel bored, well, that's one thing. But if you're doing something that's deeply tied to, I don't know, abandonment issues, for example, or neglect, or just like traumas in general, I think that's a whole other ball game, for sure. And I think that's important because, being in the men's space, it's not really talked about, dealing with emotional baggage or just traumas or anything that's happened like in the past, and taking steps to actively heal yourself from that. What are maybe some, I guess, like what's a good easy first step for guys to maybe kind of start taking that route if they've never done work like that before?
You mean like inner trauma healing work and stuff
Yeah.
like that?
Yeah, just like taking time to heal.
So you need a system in order to pull into, and I've looked at a lot. I've created some of my own. The one that's readily available, like on the internet, to research is something called the internal family systems
I've
model.
heard of that. Yeah, yeah.
Very probably one of the best ways to get yourself accustomed to this type of work,
Hmm.
because what you have to do is be able to separate different pieces of yourself into different fragments, and then build
Mm.
separate relationships with those fragments. So
Yeah.
what's weird is that inner healing actually improves your relationship game. And it's funny because you kind of have to have an open relationship with yourself. You have to
Yeah.
be really intimate with your angry fragment, really intimate with your inner child fragment, really intimate with your sadness and grief fragment, intimate with your inner sadist, intimate with your inner masochist,
Yep.
intimate with your inner narcissist. Like you have
Mm.
to start to build relationships with these pieces of yourself. And so, yeah, the internal family systems model kind of like gives you a basic structure to like how to do that.
Mm. That's interesting you bring that up because I actually was, when I was going through my training program for coaching, that was one of the things that they had mentioned. So I'm getting flashbacks just from school because I remember going through that exact model. And what is interesting about that is we're talking about also developing, which I think is a kind of overlapping theme of the whole thing, is having that relationship with yourself. Because I think at the end of the day, that is the most important relationship that you can build, is one with yourself first, to then obviously attract like legit organic relationships elsewhere. And what I'll say about the internal family system is I had a meditation I did maybe a year ago, maybe a year or two ago, where it was like a guided meditation and they were talking about your inner child. And that was one of the things that we were instructed to talk to. They let you imagine your old like house when you're growing up with your parents, and imagine like your inner child like on your doorstep. But you're also like you're there as yourself now, but you're kind of almost like viewing yourself as you were little through the eyes of an older person. And you're having to walk through your house, see what's around there, and kind of get very clear with how that environment was and like seeing what comes up. And I did that for I think a couple weeks straight. I did it like every day for 15 minutes or so. And very, very interesting things that came up, just for myself personally. Like there's a lot of stuff that I think goes unchecked for a lot of people when they don't get super when they don't clear up a lot of stuff that they didn't fix before. Like obviously, things that happen in our childhood, and manifest into adulthood if we don't have them taken care of. So any work like that, I think is a must, from especially for men because we like to act like we're superheroes and we don't have things to deal with. We don't have these issues. But I think everybody has some kind of past trauma in some way.
Yes. So we've talked about David Data, Way of the Superior Man, right?
Oh yeah.
So what's what's important to note here is this work, when you start doing it, is almost it's a movement into your feminine pole in a little
Yeah.
bit, because what you're doing is
Hmm.
you're learning how to surrender. And
Right.
surrender is all about allowing the externalization and expression of the wave of feeling that is hitting your body, which is the complete opposite of stoicism,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
So, but it's very important to have a season of this as a man, and so you move into your like kind of a feminine pole, which is healing, wounded, crying, feeling pain, grief, and then
Yeah.
at the ultimately at the end of it, liberation, freedom, and power. And so,
Hmm.
but and this is what's interesting is I actually, my audience is typically working with men who are at that kind of entry and into the later stage of that feminine pole.
Hmm.
And now women are like, well, wait a minute, we want masculine men.
Yeah.
So they
Yeah.
either have to go back to the men who haven't done the work to get some masculine juice, or, these men need to figure out what that last little pulse of sprint is to move into their back into the masculine pole, back into the stoicism from a more
Mm.
integrated, healed, and articulate space.
Mm. I think that's really important that men just understand what you just said about having that small, developed, mature feminine side, because that is highly, highly glossed over in the men's space. And we talk about it as like masculinity, stoicism, groundedness, and purpose. And all these things are fantastic. Like I obviously promote all these concepts. I live these concepts. They're incredibly, incredibly 100% important. But as you just stated, there is that little piece of healing yourself and healing the traumas and being okay to be in your feminine to make sure that that is secure. I actually remember on one of the pages of The Way of the Superior Man, I think it was The Way of the Superior Man, I believe, where he talks about men um having that period of time where they use their feminine to kind of balance themselves out in that way. They have more of a an emotional type of time to kind of get clear with just past traumas, past issues that they had to kind of to heal them. So I don't know exactly if that was from Way Superior Man, so don't quote me on that. But it was a book that I read where it said men needing to have that space in order to do that. Because the way that I look at it is, if you want to help women feel secure, you want to help them feel safe and secure in a relationship. I think you do have to make yourself feel secure, make yourself feel safe at some point. Speaking like from your inner child, like your inner systems, you have to make yourself as a man like feel safe and protected until you can make somebody else feel that way too.
Yeah, and you can't even request it or understand or connect to it unless you've experienced it on your own. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, like I said before, you can't like it's going to be very difficult to get surrender or submission from a woman if you've never been there yourself. If you
Yeah.
don't truly know what it feels like, you have to be able to connect to it. You have to be
Mm.
able to really be able to understand what you're requesting of from your feminine partner
Hmm.
when you're requesting surrender.
Mm.
Um, and so, yeah, that's why I think the most important nuance for most men's work coaches or people who are leading in the space to get is, are we here to help men? Are we here? Is this specific man in front of me need to begin his healing work journey and touch his feminine points? Or is this man in the healing journey and needs to begin to touch his masculine points?
Mm.
Most important nuance as a coach right now.
Yeah. I would agree 1,000%. I think that that's it's like it's a very delicate balance of, I think, the same coin. Like it's just two different sides. It's like the masculine, but
Mm.
also balancing that out with a healthy, like safe, secure, feminine side that is, it's not demonized because I think some guys do demonize like their feminine side. They don't want to seem soft, they don't want to seem like they're weak in any way, but I don't think that really I don't think those two things are mutually exclusive. Like you could be a strong masculine leader, a good guy, a good man, but also have a mature feminine pole to really balance himself out. Because I think if you're I don't think any two sides of the extreme is good
Right.
for any dynamic. You know what I mean? All the way masculine, all the way feminine sounds good in theory, but I don't think there's too many people like that. And if there is, it's not always ideal.
Yeah. The 80-20 rule works best here for me.
Yeah.
So essentially what that plays out to is 1 to 2 days a week you get to be in your feminine.
I
So for me, that's
like it.
ecstatic dance on Sundays and in the mornings when I, stretch and feel and move around or whatever. So
Hmm. I like that. The 80-20 rule. That applies to a lot of stuff. But I like that.
definitely.
I like that breakdown. So yeah, man, I think that's an awesome way to kind of segue into the conclusion here. I love the discussion that we just talked about. We had a lot of really great topics and talking points that we made. Um, if anybody wants to kind of find more about you and your work, yeah, where can they find you at?
Yeah, on Instagram at fully FULLY underscore aligned ALIGNED is going to be the best place. Just shoot me a follow and a DM. Just be like, hey, saw the interview. I'm curious. And basically, if anyone was ever curious to work with me, it would look like an interview would be the first step. So we would call you on and I would just ask you some questions, see if we're
Mhm.
even like a fit. And then what I do is write custom made programs and tailored proposals for people that I'll ship off, let you look over, no pressure in the sales or anything.
Mhm.
And yeah, we'll set up a whole season of work depending on what it needs to look like.
Love it. Love it. Yeah. And guys, if you want to see his socials, I'll leave all Zach's links down below in the description as well to make it easier for you guys to find him. And obviously, you know where to find me. Subscribe to the channel. Make sure to like. Obviously, follow me Instagram, TikTok. I got content coming out all the time. If you want to work with me, you know where my links are. You know what I'm about in the description. And yeah, guys, I appreciate you coming along and watching this. Make sure you, again, I say this all the time. Make sure you watch these a couple times because the first time you watch it, there's going to be things you missed. There's going to be things you didn't quite pick up on. So it's good to refresh yourself and then go out and apply this information. Don't just kind of have it sit there and absorb it. Actually apply it, use it to yourself. We talked about a lot of valuable things. So, try to use this information to your best advantage and make sure to check in next week. I want to have a new guest every single weekend where I have a new podcast guest. We talk about something deep, something awesome, something that's relevant to you guys to help out. So I want to appreciate Zach for hopping on, man. This was an awesome conversation. I think there was a ton of value in what we talked about. So yeah, man, I just appreciate you hopping on.
Yeah, this was a great interview and you hold the space well.
Thanks, man. Appreciate that. Yeah, hopefully get you on sometime in the future. I'd love to
Yeah,
do
we'll
a
do it again.
collab or like we had a panel before where I had a couple guys on, so maybe we can get even a couple guys on at once. That'd be
Yeah,
fun.
call me on, man. I love talking about this stuff. So
Absolutely. Cool guys. Well, we're gonna bounce. Have an awesome rest of your week and we'll see you soon. Peace.
peace.